Hi everybody. In this video I'm going to show you the top 10 pictures I got on a recent dive trip to the Blue Heron Bridge in April 2017. The bad news is I got a lot of lousy pictures, but the good news, I'm only going to show you my very best. So let's check it out. For my wide angle setup, I used a Nikon D7100 with 12 to 24 millimeter rectilinear wide angle lens set to 12 millimeters. I used a +2 or +4 wet diopter to allow for closer focusing, for close focus wide angle, and a 6-inch acrylic dome port, all seen here. Our dives were no deeper than 20 feet at the Blue Heron Bridge. The visibility wasn't always great, so I don't generally use a strobe, just available light for wide angle. 3 of my top images were taken with this setup. For the next 3 images, all close focus wide angle, I shot in aperture priority mode with a modestly small aperture to maintain good depth of field, around f8, and a higher ISO set to 800 to allow for a fast enough shutter speed to stop the action. This is a close focus wide angle of a yellow ray with my dive buddy in the background. The lighting's pretty good, the focus is decent for both the foreground and background, and I like it that the horizon is level. I got some size perspective distortion with the ray looking larger than the diver, and the diver profile and the diver gaze is good, though her body is cut off. The image might have been better if the diver was further away from the ray. This is a beautiful cuttlefish, only a few feet under the surface. I was only at about 8 feet depth and was still under the cuttlefish to get some water under surface and show some of the sky above in the background. I locked my focus on the cuttlefish, then recomposed the image so the cuttlefish wasn't in the center but it was still in focus. Remember, I shot available light, wide angle, and aperture priority mode, and in this shot there was plenty of light, so I got a fast shutter speed to prevent any motion blur. I used pretty much the same technique and settings for this image, and I love this close focus wide angle image, the cuttlefish in the foreground and my dive buddy in the background with the undersurface above. For macro and super macro, I used a Nikon D7100 with a 60mm macro lens shown at the right and a 1.4x teleconverter shown at the left. The teleconverter goes in between the lens and the camera body. The teleconverter allows greater than 1-to-1 magnification on the sensor if one can get close. And but if you're a little farther away, then you get more typical macro, like fish portraits, etc. I also had a +10 retractable external wet diopter for ultra super macro in case the subject allowed a really close approach. This magnifies the subject even more, but it does reduce the working distance. This shows the typical setup I use for super macro when I have the +10 wet diopter lens in position. I generally use just one strobe to keep it simple, and I often position it very close to the port as seen here. Now for normal macro, if the subject of course is a little further away, then the strobe is out a little further from the port and directed more straight out rather than in. For macro and super macro, I kept the ISO at the lowest, 100. The shutter speed as fast as it'll go, but not more than 1 to 200ths of a second, or it won't sync with the strobe. I generally use a small aperture, f20 or smaller, though sometimes I open the aperture, of course, to exploit depth of field, minimize it even further, and sort of sculpt my image. Now here's a macro image showing a beautiful octopus profile, taking from a distance of about 2 feet, nothing special, but I just love that beautiful octopus. Now, I was pretending to ignore an eel to try to get a really close shot to capture its eye, and when I was fiddling around adjusting my strobe position and looking at my LCD, I noted this odd behavior of 2 grunts right nearby. And I was just about 10 inches away from these grunts, and I took a couple of quick shots and was lucky to get this image, which I really like. It turned out to be one of my top 10 images of the trip. Then I gradually approached the eel and tried to get a shot of its eye. I took some practice shots and the eel seemed to accept my presence and the strobe going off. I flipped the +10 diopter wet lens over the flat port and I got really close, and I love this image. You can see the cornea and the mottled colors of the skin refracted through the crystalline lens. The green arrows point to that, the crystalline lens, and you can see the mottled colors on the side view. I used a similar technique and super macro settings here to get the front view of this beautiful octopus eye. This shows chromatophores in the iris, which are similar to the chromatophores in the skin as far as I can tell. The octopus eye, remember, is derived from skin. And unlike vertebrates, where the eye is derived from neural or brain tissue, the pupil here is widely dilated since it was a night shot, and you can see the edge of the round, spherical, crystalline lens. Really cool. I love that. It's a beautiful shot, in my opinion. Now here, I even got a higher magnification just showing the beautiful iris detail of a part of this octopus eye. Very interesting. Then I got a couple others. I got this ultra super macro shot just showing eggs of a banded coral shrimp, which I thought was kind of cool. And finally, I got an ultra super macro shot of the small compound eye of this red banded coral shrimp. I learned a while back, people think you're a much better photographer when you only show them your very best pictures. Well, thanks for your attention, and I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for tuning in.